This is the mansion of a wealthy man named James. His villa had many servants and gardeners. That morning, as usual, James awoke as soon as he got out of bed without covering anything, and stretched out enjoying the morning sun, and the gardeners made such inappropriate decisions every morning. I was forced to see myself naked. After stretching out his body and getting dressed, James didn't immediately go to work. He first practiced martial arts with a personal trainer, but he was unable to fight back at all, even though he has been practicing martial arts for years. James' life was perfect. He was smart, had a good career, had a great net worth, and also had a beautiful woman named Alyssa, his fiancée. Alyssa is the daughter of the business owner that James worked for. Despite all this, James' life feels like the most perfect life a human being can have. Elsewhere, a man named Darnell was seen calling his friends to ask for a business loan, but despite asking everywhere, no one has yet been found to help. Darnell was so lost that he once asked his daughter to lend money to a friend at school. Her wife was disgusted to see her husband's attitude. She said she should save instead of borrowing more money to increase her debt. As her wife, she understood her husband's dilemma and sought to strengthen and support him. After Darnell dropped her daughter off at school, she immediately drove to the car wash in the basement parking lot of the office where James worked. When James came to work that day, everyone cheered him on because he was not only the closest person to his boss, but he was also a great employee. In the afternoon, James was called into the office of his boss, the company owner, and Alyssa's father, Martin. Martin praised James for his excellent work in bringing his $28 million profit to the company. He then ordered his future son-in-law to call himself father. James was moved by what he just heard. He cried and hugged Martin tightly. As he finished his work and was about to drive his car, Darnell came by and surprised him. When he saw the Negro walking in front of him, he was so surprised that he thought Darnell was going to ambush him. It turns out he just wanted to give James the car keys. So James washed his car at the Darnell house every day. James apologized if he was a little racist, but Darnell saw an opportunity and offered James to invest in a car wash business. He said that with only $30,000 invested he would definitely make a profit within a few months, but unfortunately James wasn't interested and walked away. That night, James and Alyssa celebrated their engagement party. It was a luxurious party. Alyssa bought James an electric guitar as a present. She even invited James' favorite singer to the party. During the party, a group of FBI agents suddenly appears and arrests James on suspicion of embezzling company funds. James was confused because as far as he knew he had never done anything wrong, and despite trying to explain everything he was still getting arrested. The next day, Martin visits James with a lawyer to help him handle his case, but strangely enough, the lawyer doesn't seem to be on James' side. He didn't want to hear James explain, instead asking him to admit he was wrong. Lawyers said that if he pleaded guilty, the trial would end quickly and he would only get a year in prison. James got annoyed when he heard that. Whatever happened, he knew he was innocent, so he wasn't going to plead guilty at trial. Since news of James' arrest broke, the company's customers have been scandalized and have been demonstrating in court, demanding the harshest possible punishment for James, even life imprisonment. A trial took place a few days later. James continued to defend him during the trial, which ultimately made his punishment even more severe. A judge sentenced him to 10 years in America's toughest prison. Before the sentence was handed down, the judge gave him 30 days to process the files if he wanted to appeal. So James had to be a town prisoner for the next 30 days, with a tracking alarm device attached to his leg to prevent him from escaping. The day after becoming a prisoner in the city, James, who usually wakes up happy, can only cry and scream, saddened by what happened to him. He accused God of being too unfair to him. He felt like the most suffering person in the world. After days of crying, James finally came up with an idea. He decided to flee America. After gathering all his supplies, he removed the tracking alarm device at his feet, determined to disguise himself to go unnoticed. Later he met Alyssa at a restaurant. When the two met, James asked her to elope abroad with him, but Alyssa refused and offered to separate, saying she didn't want to live with them in poverty. She said he could be free and homeless abroad, but she had no intention of coming with him. After hearing her say that, Alyssa realized that all along she only loved her money. The police soon showed up and James was arrested. Knowing that it would be impossible for him to escape the city, James decided to meet Darnell at the car wash. After explaining all his problems, James asks for help, thinking Darnell might have been in prison before because of his appearance. He apologized for the racist act against him. James was very scared. He was afraid to meet people in prison, so he asked Darnell to teach him how to survive in prison. Darnell was at a loss for words when he heard that. He had never been to prison and was a little offended. Just because he's black doesn't mean he's a criminal, but when Darnell saw the opportunity, he had a quick idea. He was willing to cooperate as long as James paid him $30,000. James, who didn't think $30,000 was a big deal, readily agreed. After returning home, Mr. Darnell told his wife about the deal with James, which infuriated her. She was disappointed because he decided to cheat on someone. Plus, it would be impossible for Darnell to teach James about life in prison. He didn't even know what life in prison was like. Darnell hasn't run out of ideas. While his wife was asleep, he tried to contact his former prison cousin and asked him to tell him all about his experiences in prison. After receiving a lot of information, Darnell is ready to train James. The next day, I went to James' house. Darnell asked if he ever practiced self-defense with James. James didn't answer, but confidently changed his clothes and showed Darnell the self-defense techniques he had learned over the years from his tutor. Darnell was speechless at the sight of James' bizarre movements. He then picked up the remote control and pretended to stab him, saying his years of martial arts training had been wasted. James couldn't accept the cold truth Darnell told him. To make it look like a real prison, Darnell built a special room in the basement of James' house that resembled a cell. He even remodeled the entire house and even installed an electric fence in James' garden. After days of preparation, there are only 21 days left before James is actually arrested. The next afternoon, I received a phone call from James Martin asking about the investigation into his case. While on the phone, Martin happened to hear Darnell's voice and asked him out. He explained that James would help him prepare before going to prison. When the phone hung up, Martin looked terrified. He feared that a man named Darnell would thwart his plans. It turns out that Martin was the mastermind behind the incident. He accused James of taking money from investors to pay off the company's debt. The only reason Martin blamed James was because he didn't allow James to date his daughter. He then ordered personal bodyguards to monitor James and Darnell's every move. James kept training for days, and although it was difficult at first, after a few days of training he started to get used to it. He did physical training with Darnell and even went to several people's homes to test his fighting skills, but despite his best efforts, he never seemed to get the hang of it. He even tried to escape from his self-made prison, but was unable to do so. There are 10 days left before his appeal. When Darnell went to the basement to check on James during the day, he was surprised to see James sharpening a homemade knife. Darnell was proud of him because he was able to turn the nerdy James into a very creepy guy. At night, Darnell gave James his final test. He said he was 100% sure James would survive in prison if he could pass the test. The ordeal was that James had to get out of his cell during a riot. Darnell would then simulate a prison riot with his servants and gardeners, and would be declared ready if James made it out safely. After all the preparations, the final exam has finally begun. James failed miserably. As things began to settle, Darnell was shocked to see a knife stuck in James' forehead. A panicked Darnell rushed home so his wife could treat James' injuries. After her treatment, Mr. Darnell's wife invited Mr. James to dinner. During dinner, Mr. Darnell's wife and his daughter were shocked to see Mr. James obsessively eating. When he finally left home, Darnell's wife was pessimistic. He concluded that there was no way James would survive prison. Needless to say, he would have survived the harsh conditions of the prison, and his strange behavior would have kept him from even getting into his daughter's school. Hearing that, Darnell became pessimistic. James didn't have much time left. The next day, Darnell invites James to meet his cousin Russell, who is in prison. When they got there, they saw a bunch of thugs who were members of Russell's gang. Inside the house, Darnell begged Russell to contact his friends in prison and protect James while he was in prison, but unfortunately he was unable to do so. He explained that all his friends in prison were black and did not want to protect James, who was white. Russell suggested that James go to the white gang and ask for help. Russell said that James and Darnell had gone to a white gang's base that night. James entered the base alone while Darnell waited outside, but when Darnell entered the base to seek help, gang members assumed him to be an undercover police officer and began torturing him. Thankfully, Darnell realized James needed help. He rioted and bought time for them to flee from there. Fortunately, James and Darnell managed to escape. Afterwards, the two stopped at a cafe to rest. Darnell then asked if James had embezzled the company's money. James denied this, but he tried to convince Darnell of his innocence. After his return home, James continued to try to explain the details of the incident, which Darnell deduced was Martin alone. James was convinced Martin was the mastermind behind everything, but still couldn't believe how he could be tricked by his future father-in-law. Darnell then asks James to look for evidence of corporate transaction data stored on Martin's secret computer in the office's warehouse. When they arrived, they disguised themselves as janitors to avoid arousing suspicion. After breaking into the warehouse, the two quickly took the computer away, but as they were about to leave, Martin's bodyguard suddenly appeared and threatened them with a gun. In an attempt to fight the bodyguard, James manages to throw the gun out of his hand, but when Darnell picks it up, his hands, which had never held a gun before, tremble. A bodyguard sees this, retrieves his gun, and leaves with a secret computer. James is upset to discover that Darnell has been lying all along and that he was taking advantage of him. Then he left Darnell alone. The next day, James decides to join Russell's gang, hoping that if he commits a serious crime, the prisoners will no doubt respect and fear him. 2 days later, James and Russell's gang planned a bank robbery. Before taking action, Russell gave James a gun just in case and took a picture with the other gang members. Then Darnell suddenly came to apologize and at the same time begged James not to give up. If they work together, they can find evidence of Martin's deception and fight back. Hearing that, James hesitated. He was still shaken, but deep inside James was glad that Darnell had caught up with him even though he had been deceived, but after spending more than 20 days together, he was willing to help him wholeheartedly. I felt that it was only Darnell. James eventually decided he wasn't going to rob a bank and went after Darnell. There were only 20 hours left before James was picked up by the police. On the way, Mr. Darnell was about to wash Mr. Martin's car when he noticed that the tires of Martin's car were covered with sand. He said he didn't come with it. It is always covered with beach sand every week. He was convinced Martin hid all the evidence in his private boat. So they decided to find out. When they reached port, Darnell's suspicions were confirmed. They witnessed a bodyguard yesterday bring Martin's secret computer to Martin's private boat. Then they both sneaked inside. After boarding the boat, James rushes to take the computer, but Martin's men come from behind and arrest James and Daniel. The bodyguard told James to surrender. James was weak and he couldn't beat them. Hearing these words, James suddenly fought like a real fighter and defeated everyone as if possessed by fighters. They both win the battle, but just as they are about to leave, Martin and Alyssa come in to find all their men lost. They then try to seduce James, but he refused the provocation. He then told Darnell to leave immediately in the lifeboat. Martin, who knew he was cornered, demanded his bodyguards threaten him with a gun. Luckily, James remembered Russell handing him a gun this afternoon, and he quickly withheld it. Amidst the tension, James explained that he was now waiting for the police to arrive. James' words confused Martin. It was impossible for the police to advance in the middle of the sea, but they did come shortly after. James later revealed that the tracking device the police had put on him was activated because he had just crossed the city limits. After the police examined the evidence and checked the data on the computer, Martin and his men were arrested and James was released. James was grateful for bringing the gun Russell had given him, but one of the officers saw the gun in his hand and he was eventually seen as a danger to society. Arrested for illegal possession of a firearm. James was jailed for 6 months, but fortunately, he was able to survive his prison life thanks to his previous incident. Even when another inmate tried to harass him, he fearlessly fought back. Additionally, James and Darnell had become good friends after spending dozens of days with Darnell. James has also invested in a Darnell car wash. He was confident that his best friend would make his business a success. In fact, predictably, Darnell's business seems to be growing rapidly as the months go by. His car wash was moved to a larger location and used automated machines. Freedom has finally arrived for James. Darnell waits outside the prison for his best friend to show up. He happily hugged James and took his best friend home. And in the end, after enduring numerous challenges and uncovering a web of deception, James and Darnell's friendship stood strong. James managed to expose the truth behind his false accusation and bring the real culprits to justice. With his newfound freedom and a flourishing car wash business, James's life took an unexpected turn, filled with hope and the unwavering support of his loyal friend Darnell.